Alarms tear through the corridor before I even open my eyes. Red light floods my quarters, pulsing like a heartbeat gone wrong. I am on my feet before I understand why, one boot on and the other still in my hand, when the ship-wide speaker crackles with Captain Laura Bennett's voice. All hands battle stations. Unknown vessel decloaking off our starboard bow. This is not a drill. I drop the boot. I do not need it right now. What I need is Titan. My name is Ethan Carter, and 3 weeks ago I was the newest cadet assigned to the Biology Corps aboard the UES Horizon, a modest exploration vessel with a modest crew and an even more modest reputation. We were not built for war. We were built to catalog star systems, sample soil, and occasionally get excited about a moss that glows in the dark. Nobody on this ship expected to meet anyone who wanted to fight us. Nobody, except maybe Titan. I sprint down the corridor toward the kennel bay, my heart slamming against my ribs, and I hear him before I see him, a low growl, steady and controlled, vibrating through the metal floor. Titan is not an ordinary dog. He is close to 200 pounds of reinforced muscle, dense black fur, and eyes that seem to understand far more than a normal animal should. He was the result of a classified uplift program back on Earth, a program most of the crew still do not fully understand, myself included. All I know is that I was assigned to be his handler, and in 3 weeks he has become the only creature aboard this ship who does not treat me like the lowest rank in the room. When I reach the kennel bay, he is already standing, ears forward, staring at the reinforced window as if he can see straight through the hull into space itself. "Easy, boy," I whisper, clipping his harness with hands that will not stop shaking. "Whatever is out there, we handle it together." He leans his head against my shoulder for half a second, just long enough to steady me, and then we are moving, following the flow of crew toward the observation deck. What I see there stops me cold. The unknown vessel is not simply large, it is enormous, black and curved like a blade someone forgot to sheathe, hanging in space with a silence that feels almost insulting. Golden markings crawl along its hull in patterns I do not recognize, and a dozen smaller ships flank it like teeth around a mouth. Commander Oliver Pierce stands near the main viewport, arms folded, jaw tight. Sensors confirm it. Kryvax Dominion warcruiser, designation unclear. Weapons hot, but not locked. Not locked, Captain Bennett repeats, half to herself. So they want to talk first. Or they want to enjoy themselves first, Pierce mutters. The comm system chimes, and every voice on the deck falls silent. A translated transmission crackles through the speakers, and the voice that follows is smooth, amused, and utterly unbothered by the tension radiating from our side of the exchange. "This is Admiral Vresh of the Kryvax Dominion 3rd Fleet. You are trespassing in a designated Dominion survey corridor. Identify yourselves before I decide whether you are worth identifying." Captain Bennett steps forward, chin lifted. "This is Captain Laura Bennett of the UES Horizon, representing the human systems of Earth. We were unaware this corridor was claimed. We mean no provocation." There is a pause, then laughter. Not static, not distortion, actual laughter, rich and unhurried, as if someone had just told a very good joke at a dinner party. "Human systems of Earth," Vresh repeats, savoring the words like they taste strange in his mouth. "I have heard of your kind, soft, slow, emotional. I did not expect you to send a vessel this size to greet me, though I suppose scale means little when the crew inside is this small." Pierce's jaw tightens further, but he says nothing. Bennett keeps her composure, her voice even. "We are a peaceful exploration crew, Admiral. We have no interest in conflict." "Peaceful," Vresh says, as though testing the word for weaknesses. "Then perhaps you would not mind if I inspect your vessel personally. I find your species curious. I have never toured a ship this quaint." The word lands like a slap across the deck. I see Bennett's shoulders stiffen, see Pierce's hand curl into a fist at his side, but nobody argues. Arguing with a fleet that size is not a negotiation, it is a countdown. "You are welcome to send a delegation," Bennett says carefully. "Generous," Vresh replies, and I swear I can hear him smiling. I will come myself. It has been quite some time since anything in this quadrant has amused me. The transmission cuts, and the silence that follows is worse than the laughter. Lieutenant Grace Whitfield, our tactical officer, breaks it first. Captain, with respect, why would an admiral board a ship this small personally? Admirals do not do inspections. Because he wants a story to tell, Pierce says grimly. He wants to walk onto a human ship, see how unimpressive we are up close, and take that story back to his fleet. I feel a chill crawl up my spine that has nothing to do with the ship's recycled air. Beside me, Titan's growl deepens, low and steady, aimed at nothing I can see. I rest my hand on his back, partly to calm him, partly because I need the steadiness myself. Ethan, Bennett says suddenly, turning toward me. My name in her mouth feels like a spotlight switching on. You and the beast will be part of the greeting formation. My stomach drops somewhere near my remaining boot. Captain, Titan is a research subject, not a... He is the closest thing to a symbol we have, Bennett interrupts, not unkindly. Every fleet respects strength, even symbolic strength. A soldier at the door means nothing to them. A creature they cannot immediately categorize might make them pause, even for a moment. I want to argue that Titan is gentle, that he has never so much as raised his voice, so to speak, against anyone aboard this ship, that treating him as a weapon feels wrong on some level I cannot fully explain. But orders are orders, and the clock is already running. 2 hours later, I am standing in the docking corridor, Titan seated calmly beside me, his leash looped once around my wrist out of habit rather than necessity. Around us, a small honor line of crew members stands stiffly, uniforms straightened, faces carefully blank. It is meant to look dignified. It mostly looks like a group of people trying very hard not to look frightened. The docking clamps groan as the Kryvax shuttle connects. The sound rattles through the floor and into my boots, and Titan's ears flatten slightly, not in fear, but in focus. The airlock hisses open. Admiral Vresh steps through first, and my first thought is that he is taller than I expected, easily 2 heads above Pierce, his skin a deep bronze that catches the corridor lighting in strange metallic glints. His armor is ornate rather than practical, polished plates, layered like ceremonial dress rather than battlefield gear. He does not walk like a soldier. He walks like a man who has never once doubted that a room belongs to him the moment he enters it. Behind him, 4 Kryvax soldiers file in, their armor simpler, their postures rigid. Vresh's eyes sweep across the honor line, unimpressed, until they land on Titan. He stops. For a long moment, nobody speaks. Vresh tilts his head, studying Titan the way someone might study a strange insect they found on their boot. Then, slowly, a smile spreads across his face, sharp and delighted. "Fascinating," he says, his translated voice carrying easily down the corridor. "I was told humans kept small biological companions. I did not expect one quite this large, nor quite this decorative." A ripple of quiet laughter moves through the soldiers behind him. Bennett steps forward smoothly. "Admiral Vresh, welcome aboard the Horizon. We hope your visit is brief and productive." Vresh does not look at her. His attention is entirely fixed on Titan, who sits perfectly still beside me, watching the Admiral with an unblinking, patient focus that I have never quite seen in him before. "Tell me," Vresh says, crouching slightly, hands clasped behind his back, "does this creature serve any purpose beyond decoration? Is it meant to guard something, frighten someone?" He straightens, addressing his soldiers now more than us. "In my empire, we do not parade animals as symbols of strength. We simply are the strength." More laughter, sharper this time. I feel heat rise in my face, not from embarrassment for myself, but for Titan, who cannot understand the words but seems to sense the tone shifting around him. His growl returns, quieter now, more of a vibration than a sound. "He is not decoration," I say before I can stop myself. Every eye in the corridor turns toward me, including Vresh's. "Ah," the Admiral says, delighted. The handler speaks. Tell me, small one, what exactly is this creature capable of that your captain thought it wise to display him at my arrival? I open my mouth, and for a moment, nothing comes out. The truth is, I do not fully know what Titan is capable of. Nobody aboard this ship does. Not completely. The uplift program that created him was compartmentalized even from most of the science team. I only know the parts of his file that were shared with handlers, and even that felt incomplete. He is loyal, I say finally, choosing the only truth I am certain of, and he protects the people he is bonded to. Vresh's smile does not waver, but something in his eyes sharpens, like a predator noticing movement in tall grass. Loyalty, he repeats. How touching. Perhaps I should meet him properly then, since he seems to matter so much to you. Bennett shifts beside me, and I catch the flicker of concern crossing her face before she smooths it away. Admiral, perhaps we should proceed to the briefing room. There is much to discuss regarding the survey corridor. There will be time for discussion, Vresh says, waving a hand without looking at her. First, I would like to greet this famous beast myself. He takes a step forward. Titan does not move, does not growl louder, does not so much as shift his weight. He simply watches, still and steady, as the admiral of an entire Dominion fleet closes the distance between them, one slow step at a time, his hand beginning to rise. I glance at Bennett. She gives the smallest shake of her head, a silent order to hold position, to not interfere, to let this play out exactly as it is unfolding. My pulse hammers in my throat. Every instinct in me wants to pull Titan back, to put myself between him and this stranger's hand, but something in Titan's posture stops me. He is not afraid, he is not defensive, he is simply waiting, the way he waits before a storm, calm in a way that feels less like innocence and more like certainty. Vresh stops less than an arm's length away, studying Titan with open curiosity now, the mockery in his expression softening slightly into something closer to genuine interest. Remarkable creature, he murmurs, almost to himself. Such discipline for an unenhanced species. His hand hovers in the air between them, close enough now that I can see the faint shimmer of some kind of protective coating along his knuckles. Standard Dominion issue, I assume, though I have no idea what it is meant to protect against. The corridor is utterly silent. Even the ship's ambient hum seems to fade into the background. I do not breathe. I do not blink. I simply watch, frozen between duty and instinct, as Admiral Vresh's fingers drift the final few inches toward Titan's dark, waiting fur. And just as his hand makes contact, I feel the floor beneath my boots begin to hum with something I have never felt before. The moment stretches, thin and fragile, like the air itself is holding its breath. Vresh's fingers rest lightly against Titan's fur, and for a heartbeat, nothing happens at all. The Admiral chuckles softly, clearly expecting nothing more than the simple texture of an alien animal beneath his palm. Soft, he says, almost disappointed. I expected something coarser, something built for. He does not finish the sentence. Titan's body goes rigid, every muscle locking at once, and a faint blue-white shimmer ripples outward from where Vresh's hand rests against him, spreading across his fur like light moving through water. It is beautiful, in a strange and terrible way, and for one suspended second, I think perhaps it is harmless, some kind of static discharge, some quirk of alien biology meeting Earth fur. Then Vresh's entire body stiffens. His fingers do not pull back. They cannot. It is as though something has locked his hand in place, holding it exactly where it landed, while the shimmer intensifies, climbing up his arm in slow, deliberate pulses. His mouth opens, and the sound that comes out is not laughter this time. It is something closer to shock, a sharp intake of breath that cuts off halfway through. "Admiral," one of his soldiers calls out, stepping forward. Vresh's knees buckle. Everything happens at once after that. The 4 Kryvax soldiers surge forward, weapons rising from their sides, though none of them seem to know what to aim at or how to help their falling commander. Bennett shouts something I cannot fully process, her hand snapping up toward Pierce, who is already moving, positioning himself between the soldiers and the rest of the crew without drawing a weapon, careful not to escalate whatever this is into something worse. I do the only thing my body seems capable of doing. I drop to my knees beside Titan, my hands hovering uselessly over his shoulders, terrified to touch him, terrified not to. "Titan," I whisper, my voice cracking. "Titan, look at me." His eyes do not move from Vresh. They are wide, focused, and utterly calm, which somehow frightens me more than if he had looked panicked. This is not an accident. Whatever is happening, some part of him understands it completely. Vresh collapses fully to one knee, his other hand slamming against the corridor floor to catch himself, his breathing ragged and uneven. The blue-white shimmer along his arm fades slowly, retreating back toward Titan like water being pulled back into a tide, until it disappears entirely beneath his fur, leaving no mark, no visible trace that anything happened at all. The silence that follows is the loudest thing I have ever heard. "Admiral!" one of the soldiers shouts again, finally rushing forward to catch Vresh under the arm, hauling him upright with visible effort. Vresh's legs are unsteady beneath him, his usually composed face now pale and slick with sweat, his eyes wide with something I have never seen on him before this moment, genuine, unguarded fear. "What?" he gasps, his translated voice stripped of all its earlier confidence. "Was that?" Nobody answers, because nobody knows. I certainly do not. I stare at Titan, who has finally relaxed his posture slightly, sitting back on his haunches as though nothing unusual has happened, as though he has not just brought down the admiral of an entire Dominion fleet with a single touch of contact. His tongue lolls out, almost casually, and for one absurd, disorienting moment, he looks exactly like the same gentle animal I fed breakfast to only hours earlier. "Get him to the shuttle," one of the soldiers barks, and the others move quickly, flanking Vresh, weapons still raised, eyes darting between Titan and the rest of us as though the corridor itself has become a threat. Bennett steps forward carefully, hands raised, palms open. "Admiral, please, let us assist. We have medical facilities aboard, if you require." "Do not touch me," Vresh snarls, his voice thick with pain and something rawer beneath it, something that sounds almost like humiliation. "None of you. Get me back to my ship." The soldiers do not wait for further instruction. They half carry, half drag their admiral back through the airlock, their formation ragged and hurried in a way that feels almost undignified for a fleet that arrived with such polished confidence only minutes earlier. One of them glances back over his shoulder as the airlock begins to close, his eyes finding Titan one last time, and I catch something in that final look that is not quite fear and not quite awe, but some uneasy mixture of both. The airlock seals behind them with a hiss that feels, to my exhausted mind, almost like the ship itself exhaling in relief. For a moment, I simply stand there, staring at the space where the admiral of an entire Dominion fleet had collapsed only seconds earlier, trying to piece together what I just witnessed. It does not feel real. None of it feels real. Not the arrival of that enormous cruiser, not the mockery in Vresh's voice, not the strange blue-white shimmer that spread across Titan's fur like something alive in its own right. I keep expecting someone to call it off, to admit this was some kind of drill or simulation designed to test our reactions under pressure. Nobody does. For several seconds, nobody in the corridor moves. Then Pierce breaks the silence, his voice low and disbelieving. "Did that dog just take down a Dominion admiral with a single touch?" "Language, Commander," Bennett says automatically, though her voice carries none of its usual authority. She looks shaken, staring at Titan with an expression I cannot quite read, somewhere between awe and concern. Ensign Mia Turner, one of the junior communications officers, presses herself against the corridor wall, eyes wide, staring at Titan as though he might suddenly grow a second head. "Is it going to happen again?" she asks nobody in particular, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is it going to do that to one of us?" "He's bonded to me," I say, forcing calm into my own voice for her benefit as much as mine. The response was triggered by a threat to his handler. He's not going to hurt anyone standing here. Turner does not look entirely convinced, and honestly, neither am I. I have spent 3 weeks with this animal, feeding him, walking him, scratching behind his ears every evening before lights out, and yet in the space of a single heartbeat, he became something I no longer fully recognize. That thought sits uneasily in my chest as I finally allow myself to touch him, running my hands along his sides, checking him for any sign of injury, any indication that whatever just happened cost him something. He leans into my touch, tail thumping once against the floor, utterly unbothered, as if he has simply completed a task he was designed to complete and is now waiting for his next instruction. He's fine, I say, my voice barely steady. He's completely fine. Fine, Whitfield repeats from where she stands near the tactical console, having rushed down the moment the alarms shifted status. Ethan, do you have any idea what just happened? Any idea at all? I shake my head slowly. I only know what was in his handler file. Basic bonding protocols, feeding schedules, exercise routines. Nothing about this. Then who does know? Pierce asks, turning toward Bennett. Bennett's jaw tightens, and for the first time since I have served under her, I see genuine uncertainty cross her face. The uplift program that created him was authorized several clearance levels above my own. I was told he was a companion animal with enhanced intelligence markers. I was not told he was. She trails off, searching for the right word. A weapon, Whitfield finishes quietly. I do not know if that is accurate, Bennett says, though she does not sound entirely convinced of her own denial. But I intend to find out, immediately. The comm system chimes before anyone can respond further, and this time, the voice that comes through is not Vresh's. It is younger, sharper, carrying an edge of barely restrained anger. UES Horizon, this is General Korath of the Kryvax Third Fleet, acting commander in Admiral Vresh's incapacitation. You will explain immediately what weapon was used against our Admiral, or we will consider this an act of war and respond accordingly. The corridor falls silent again, every eye turning toward Bennett. She straightens her shoulders, glancing once at Titan, who sits calmly beside me, as though the weight of an entire fleet's suspicion means nothing to him at all. General Korath, she says carefully, choosing each word with the precision of someone walking across thin ice. No weapon was used. What you witnessed was a defensive response from a bonded companion creature, triggered by unfamiliar contact. We did not anticipate this outcome, and we regret any distress caused to your Admiral. There is a long pause on the other end, filled with static and something that sounds almost like disbelief. A companion creature, Korath repeats slowly, disabled a Dominion Admiral instantly, with a single point of contact, and you are telling me this was unintentional? I am telling you, Bennett says, that we are as uncertain about the full extent of this creature's capabilities as you appear to be. Another pause, longer this time. We will require a full report, Korath finally says, his tone shifting, the anger still present, but now layered with something more calculating. And we will require clarification regarding this creature's true nature. Until then, the Third Fleet will remain in position. Do not attempt to leave this corridor. The transmission cuts abruptly, leaving the corridor in a silence thick enough to feel physical. I look down at Titan, who tilts his head slightly, studying my face with the same patient calm he showed the Admiral only minutes before. Whatever he did, whatever he is, I realize in this moment that I understand him far less than I believed I did 3 weeks ago. Ethan, Bennett says quietly, crouching slightly to meet my eyes. I need you to think carefully. Was there anything at all in his file, any note, any flagged section you might have overlooked? I rack my memory, running through every document I read before being assigned as his handler. Most of it was mundane. Feeding schedules, behavioral notes, a short paragraph about enhanced neural bonding protocols that I assumed simply meant he was smarter than an average dog. Then I remember it. A single line, buried near the bottom of a classified addendum I was told not to worry about, since it applied to extreme scenario protocols unlikely to be relevant during standard operations. There was something, I say slowly, dread pooling in my stomach as the memory sharpens. A failsafe. I thought it was just standard emergency procedure language. I didn't think it meant. I trail off, staring down at Titan, who watches me with those same steady, knowing eyes. It meant this, Whitfield finishes for me, her voice tight. Bennett paces 2 steps toward the viewport and back again, clearly turning something over in her mind before she speaks. If that failsafe is real, and if it triggers on threat perception alone, we may have just given the Dominion a reason to treat every human vessel with far more caution than they did an hour ago. Or a reason to treat every human vessel as a target that needs to be destroyed before it can trigger again, Pierce counters grimly. We don't know which way this cuts yet, Captain. No, Bennett agrees, we don't, which means our next move needs to be measured, not desperate. She turns toward me, her expression softening slightly. Ethan, I need you to keep Titan calm and close. Whatever happens next, he may be the only advantage we have left, and I would rather not discover its limits by accident a second time. I nod, though my throat feels too tight to manage actual words. Titan, sensing the shift in my posture, presses his head against my hip, steady and warm, entirely unaware that an entire fleet outside our hull is now recalculating exactly what kind of threat we represent. Ensign Turner, still pale near the corridor wall, finally speaks again, her voice small. What happens if they decide we're too dangerous to let leave this corridor at all? Nobody answers her, because nobody has an answer worth giving. Bennett straightens, exhaling slowly, her gaze drifting toward the sealed airlock where the Kryvax shuttle had docked only minutes before. Then it seems, she says quietly, that whoever designed this creature knew exactly what kind of first encounter humanity might face out here, and they built us a very unexpected kind of protection. Outside the hull, unseen but undoubtedly felt by every soul aboard the Horizon, the Dominion fleet holds its position, waiting, watching, no longer laughing. 20 minutes later, I am sitting in the science bay with Titan resting his head across my knees, while Dr. Nathan Cole scrolls through classified files on a terminal that should not even exist on a ship this small. Cole is the closest thing we have to an expert on the uplift program, though even he admits most of what he knows comes second-hand, filtered through layers of clearance he was never fully granted. Here, he says finally, turning the screen toward me, this is the section you flagged. Enhanced Neural Bonding Protocols, Subclause 4. I lean forward, reading words I skimmed past weeks ago without understanding their weight. The paragraph describes a biological defense mechanism embedded during Titan's development, designed to activate only under specific conditions, unfamiliar physical contact from an entity registering as a significant threat presence, combined with elevated stress markers from his bonded handler. It reacted to me, I whisper, the realization landing like a physical weight. Not just to Vresh touching him, it reacted to how afraid I was. Cole nods slowly. The program anticipated that human handlers might find themselves in situations exactly like this one, outnumbered, outgunned, facing a species with no reason to treat us as equals. So they built something that would respond exactly when it was needed most, without requiring a command, without requiring hesitation. But why not tell anyone? I ask, frustration creeping into my voice. Why not tell me? Because secrets only work if they stay secret, Cole says quietly. If every handler knew the full capability, sooner or later, someone would test it. Someone would use it deliberately, and that changes everything about how such a program would be perceived, both by us and by anyone watching from outside. I sit with that for a moment, watching Titan's chest rise and fall in slow, even breaths against my knees. So somewhere on Earth, there are people who knew exactly what he was capable of, and they sent him out here without telling any of us. I suspect there are people on Earth who knew a great deal more than any of us realize, Cole says, his voice careful, measured in the way of someone choosing not to speculate too loudly aboard a ship where every word might eventually be reported back through official channels. Programs like this rarely exist in isolation. If they built a failsafe this sophisticated into a companion animal, they likely built contingencies elsewhere too, ones neither of us will ever be briefed on. That's not exactly reassuring, I say. Cole allows himself a tired, humorless smile. No, I don't imagine it is. But it might explain why humanity was permitted to send exploration vessels this far out at all, despite how unprepared we appeared to be for a real confrontation. Perhaps someone back home always expected we might need protecting, long before any of us understood the shape that protection would take. Before I can respond, the ship's alert system flares to life again, sharper this time, more urgent. Bennett's voice cuts through the speakers. All hands, bridge, immediately. Cole and I exchange a look, and within moments, Titan and I are moving again, weaving through corridors that feel narrower with every passing minute, every crew member we pass wearing the same tight, anxious expression. The bridge is a storm of controlled chaos when we arrive. Whitfield stands rigid at the tactical console, her voice clipped and fast. Captain, the Dominion fleet has shifted formation, 3 cruisers moving to flank position, weapons signatures spiking across at least 6 vessels. They're posturing, Pierce says, though his tone carries less certainty than his words. Trying to intimidate us into compliance. Or preparing to strike, Bennett counters grimly, before turning toward the main viewport, where the Dominion fleet now looms larger, more organized, more deliberate than the almost lazy arrangement it held during Vresh's arrival. The comm chimes again, and General Korath's voice returns, colder now, stripped of the earlier restraint. UES Horizon, our medical teams have examined Admiral Vresh. His condition is stable, but his neural pathways show clear signs of force disruption. This is no longer a matter of curiosity. It is a matter of security. You will surrender the creature responsible for immediate study, or we will consider this vessel an active threat to Dominion forces. The bridge falls into stunned silence. Surrender him, I say before I can stop myself, my voice louder than I intend. Every head turns toward me, including Bennett's. Captain, they want to take Titan, study him, take him apart to understand what he did. I am aware of what that request means, Ethan, Bennett says quietly, though her eyes remain fixed on the fleet outside the viewport, calculating something I cannot follow. Captain, Pierce says carefully, if we refuse outright, we risk immediate escalation. 6 cruisers against 1 exploration vessel is not a fight we can win. And if we comply, Whitfield adds, we lose the only advantage we currently hold, whatever that advantage actually is. Bennett is silent for a long moment, her jaw working, her eyes moving between the viewport and the tactical display, weighing options that all seem to lead toward loss in one form or another. General Korath, she finally says, keying the comm herself, the creature you are referring to is not a weapon we deployed intentionally. It responded to a perceived threat against its bonded handler, an instinctive defensive reaction, nothing more. Surrendering him would not grant you understanding. It would only grant you a frightened, confused animal with no context for what triggered his response. Then perhaps, Korath replies, his voice sharpening further, you should provide the context yourself. Or would you rather I assume the worst, Captain, and treat this vessel as an active combatant rather than a curious accident? I would rather you understood, Bennett says, her voice remaining level despite the pressure clearly building behind her eyes, that neither outcome benefits either of our fleets. We did not come here seeking conflict, General. We came here cataloging star systems, nothing more. And yet here we are, Korath says coldly, with my Admiral recovering from an encounter your crew claims was entirely accidental. Forgive me if that explanation strains credibility. There is a pause, heavy and deliberate, before he continues. Send your handler, the one who spoke earlier. Let him explain, aboard our vessel, precisely what capabilities this creature possesses, and why your fleet thought it appropriate to conceal such a weapon during a first encounter. My stomach drops entirely this time, a cold, sinking sensation that spreads through my chest before Bennett can even respond. Absolutely not, Pierce snaps immediately. Sending a cadet alone into Dominion territory after what just happened is not diplomacy, it is a trap. I did not ask for your evaluation, Commander. Korath's voice cuts back, sharp and final. You have 1 hour to comply, or we will consider this refusal an act of continued aggression. The transmission ends, leaving the bridge suspended in a silence so tense it feels almost solid. Bennett turns toward me slowly, and I can see the war happening behind her eyes, the calculation of risk against risk, the desperate search for an option that does not end with either the ship destroyed or a cadet handed over to a fleet that clearly no longer sees us as harmless. I'll go, I say quietly, before she can speak. Ethan. Captain, they want answers about Titan, I continue, forcing steadiness into my voice that I do not entirely feel. I'm the only person aboard who has spent real time with him. If someone has to explain this, it should be me. And if this is a trap, Whitfield asks softly, if they intend to use you as leverage, or worse, then at least it isn't the entire ship at risk, I say. Just one cadet, and one dog they're already terrified of. Pierce steps forward, his expression hard. Captain, I understand the logic, but sending Ethan alone means sending our only handler off this ship. If something happens to him over there, Titan's failsafe becomes an unpredictable liability rather than a protective asset. We lose the one person who seems able to keep him calm. I've thought of that, Bennett says quietly, which is precisely why I intend to accompany the shuttle as far as Dominion space allows, remaining in direct contact throughout the entire exchange. If anything goes wrong, we will know immediately, and we will respond accordingly. Respond how? Pierce presses. With what, exactly, against 6 cruisers? Bennett does not answer that question, and the silence that follows tells me everything I need to know about how thin our options truly are. I glance down at Titan, who watches the exchange with quiet patience, entirely unaware that his own fate, and perhaps humanity's reputation across this entire region of space, now rests on a decision being argued out loud in front of him. I'm not afraid, I say, though the tremor in my own voice suggests otherwise. Or, I am, but I don't think that changes anything. Someone has to go, and it makes the most sense that it's me. Bennett studies me for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind her expression, before she finally nods, slow and reluctant. You will not go alone, she says firmly. Titan goes with you. If this General Korath wants context, he can have the full picture, whether that reassures him or terrifies him further. Cole steps forward then, holding out a small data pad. Take this. It contains everything declassified in the uplift files, along with my own notes on the bonding protocols. If they demand explanation, give them enough truth to satisfy curiosity, but nothing that reveals exactly how the failsafe can be triggered or countered. I take the pad with hands that are not entirely steady, tucking it into my jacket alongside Titan's leash, which I loop once around my wrist out of habit rather than need. 40 minutes later, I stand in the same docking corridor where Vresh collapsed only hours earlier, waiting as a small Dominion shuttle connects to our airlock once again, this time to carry me away from the horizon rather than deliver a guest to it. Titan sits beside me, calm as ever, his dark eyes fixed on the sealed airlock door with the same patient focus he showed before everything changed. Whatever happens in there, I whisper to him, more for my own comfort than his. Stay close to me. The airlock hisses open, revealing 2 armored Kryvax soldiers waiting silently on the other side, weapons holstered but hands resting near them regardless. Neither speaks. They simply gesture for me to proceed, and I step forward, Titan moving in perfect step beside me, into a shuttle bay filled with more armed personnel than I have ever seen in one place in my life. The shuttle ride is short, but feels endless. The silence inside broken only by the low hum of engines and the occasional creak of armor shifting as soldiers watch Titan with expressions caught somewhere between suspicion and outright fear. Nobody attempts to touch him, nobody even stands particularly close. I spend the ride running through everything Cole told me, rehearsing careful, measured answers in my head, trying to anticipate every question Korath might throw at me. Titan, meanwhile, seems entirely unconcerned with the gravity of the situation, resting his chin against my knee and watching the soldiers across from us with mild, almost polite curiosity, as though he is simply meeting new acquaintances rather than sitting at the center of a diplomatic crisis. One of the soldiers, younger than the others, finally breaks the silence, his translated voice hesitant. Does it understand where it is being taken? He understands he's with me, I answer honestly. Beyond that, I couldn't say. The soldier says nothing further, though his eyes remain fixed on Titan for the remainder of the journey, and I notice his hand never strays far from the weapon at his side, even though he must know, as well as I do, that a weapon would do little good if Titan's failsafe decided to activate again. When we finally dock with the Dominion cruiser, the scale of it becomes immediately apparent in a way no sensor reading could fully convey. Corridors stretch impossibly wide and tall, built for a species with different proportions and, apparently, very different ideas about intimidation through architecture alone. Every surface gleams with polished metal and golden trim, and every soldier we pass stops mid-stride to watch us pass, their conversations dying instantly. Massive view screens line certain sections of the corridor, displaying star charts and fleet insignias I do not recognize, alongside what I assume are historical images of past Dominion conquests, rendered in triumphant, almost theatrical detail. It strikes me, walking beneath them, that this entire ship was designed to remind anyone who boards it exactly how small they are in comparison to the empire that built it. I wonder, briefly, if Vresh chose to visit our modest little exploration vessel specifically because he expected the same effect to work in reverse, our smallness reinforcing his certainty of dominance. That plan, at least, did not survive contact with Titan. I am led, with Titan beside me, into a chamber far grander than any briefing room I have ever seen, dominated by a long table and a wall of view screens displaying starfields and fleet formations I do not recognize. General Korath stands at the head of the table, younger than I expected for someone holding such authority, his expression carved from something colder and more calculating than Vresh's earlier arrogance. Beside him, seated in a reinforced medical chair, is Admiral Vresh himself, pale and visibly weakened, though his eyes track Titan the moment we enter with an intensity that makes my skin crawl. "So," Korath says, his voice carrying easily across the chamber, "this is the weapon your captain claims was never meant to be a weapon at all." I straighten my shoulders, forcing my voice to remain steady despite the tremor I feel building in my chest. "He's not a weapon, General. He's a companion, built with a failsafe none of us fully understood until today." Vresh leans forward slightly in his chair, his voice weaker than before but no less sharp. "Then explain to me, Handler, precisely what that failsafe does, and precisely why it triggered the moment my hand touched his fur." I glance down at Titan, who sits calmly beside me, utterly unbothered by the room full of armed soldiers surrounding us, and I realize, with a strange and steadying clarity, that whatever answer I give in the next few minutes will decide far more than my own fate. It will decide whether humanity is remembered as vermin worth mocking, or something the galaxy finally learns to take seriously. I take a slow breath, forcing my voice to carry the confidence I do not entirely feel. Titan's bonding protocol treats his handler's safety as the highest priority he can act on. When Admiral Vresh reached toward him, the system registered elevated stress signals from me, combined with unfamiliar physical contact from an unknown species. It responded the only way it was designed to respond, by neutralizing what it perceived as a potential threat. "Neutralizing," Korath repeats, his eyes narrowing. "Your admiral was nearly incapacitated permanently. Is this the standard behavior of a companion animal in your culture?" "No," I admit, deciding honesty will serve me better than bravado here. This is not standard. Titan was created through a specialized program, one I was only partially briefed on myself. What happened today was not something my crew planned or anticipated. It surprised us as much as it surprised you." Vresh's eyes flick toward Korath, some silent exchange passing between them that I cannot fully interpret. "You expect us to believe," Vresh says slowly, "that your fleet stumbled into possessing a creature capable of disabling a Dominion admiral, entirely by accident." "I expect you to believe what actually happened," I reply, holding his gaze despite every nerve in my body urging me to look away. "You approached him after mocking my ship, my crew, and my species in front of your own soldiers. Whatever judgment his failsafe made about your intentions in that moment, I did not program it, and I could not have stopped it even if I wanted to." Vresh's expression flickers at that, something almost like reluctant amusement crossing his weathered face. "A fair point, Handler. I did not extend you the courtesy of assuming good intentions either, when we first met. I expect you to believe the truth," I reply, meeting his gaze directly despite every instinct urging me to look away. Humanity has spent generations preparing for the possibility that first contact might not go peacefully. We built protections we hoped we would never need to use. Today, we needed one. The chamber falls silent, broken only by the low hum of the ship's systems and the faint click of Titan shifting his weight beside me, patient and unreadable as ever. "And if I were to test this failsafe again," Korath says finally, his voice carrying an edge of challenge now, "here, in this room, surrounded by soldiers loyal only to the Dominion, what would happen?" My blood runs cold, but I force myself to hold his gaze. "I would strongly advise against that, General." "Is that a warning?" he asks, "or a threat?" "It's an honest answer," I say. "I don't fully understand the limits of what Titan can do. Neither do you. Testing that uncertainty in a room full of your own people seems like an unnecessary risk for both our species." Korath studies me for a long moment, and I feel the weight of every soldier's attention pressing down on me, waiting for some signal, some cue for how this encounter should end. Beside me, Titan remains perfectly still, his calm presence somehow the only steady thing in the entire chamber. Finally, Vresh speaks, his voice quieter now, stripped of its earlier arrogance entirely. "Tell me something, Handler. Was this failsafe designed specifically to respond to beings like myself? Species the Dominion has encountered before, perhaps through conflicts your Earth has not yet learned of?" I hesitate, uncertain how much truth to offer, remembering Cole's warning about giving enough to satisfy curiosity without revealing anything that could be exploited. "I don't know the full history of the program," I say carefully. "What I do know is that it was built to respond to threat, not to any specific species. Anyone who approaches a bonded handler with hostile intent risks triggering the same response, regardless of what fleet they represent." One of the soldiers stationed near the chamber's entrance shifts his weight suddenly, his hand tightening around the weapon at his hip, and for a terrible instant I think he intends to test my claim right there, in front of his general and his wounded admiral. I feel my pulse spike, and beside me, Titan's ears lift slightly, sensing the shift in my body before I even fully register my own fear. "Stand down," Korath says sharply, without even turning to look at the soldier. "Nobody touches the creature, not today." The soldier freezes, then slowly relaxes his grip, though his eyes remain fixed on Titan with an expression somewhere between resentment and relief at having been stopped before doing something foolish. I let out a slow breath I had not realized I was holding, grateful that Korath's control over his own soldiers, at least, remains absolute. "You see the difficulty this presents me," Korath continues, turning back toward me, his voice quieter now, almost contemplative. "A weapon I cannot study without risking further incident, carried by a species I do not yet fully understand, wandering through corridors my empire has claimed for generations. Convince me why I should not simply order my fleet to destroy your vessel from a distance, where this creature's failsafe cannot reach us at all." The question lands heavier than anything else spoken in this chamber so far, and I feel the full weight of it settle into my chest. cold and absolute. This is no longer a conversation about curiosity or context. This is the moment that decides whether the horizon survives to see another star system. Because destroying an exploration vessel over a misunderstanding, I say, slowly, choosing every word with care, tells every other species watching that the Dominion responds to uncertainty with immediate violence. Whatever reputation you hope to maintain among your neighboring empires, I doubt that is the story you want told about this encounter. Vresh, still seated in his medical chair, lets out a low, tired chuckle. The handler has a point, General. We came here seeking dominance over an insignificant species. Destroying them now, over an injury I very much survived, would make us look considerably more frightened than proud. Korath's jaw tightens, some internal calculation passing visibly behind his eyes, before he finally exhales and steps back from whatever ledge his question had been testing. Then this creature does not discriminate. It would respond the same way to any of us, or to members of a rival empire, equally. Correct, I say, though I have no actual certainty of this myself. It feels, in this moment, like the safest possible truth to offer, one that positions Titan as a universal deterrent rather than a weapon aimed specifically at the Dominion. Vresh leans back slowly in his chair, studying Titan with an expression that has shifted entirely from the mockery of hours earlier into something closer to wary respect. A creature that punishes hostility regardless of its source, he murmurs. How very inconvenient for anyone hoping to underestimate your species. That was rather the point, Admiral, I say, allowing a small measure of confidence to creep into my voice now that I sense the tide of the conversation shifting. Korath exchanges another glance with Vresh, longer this time, and something passes between them that feels less like suspicion now and more like reluctant calculation. Finally, Korath turns back toward me, his posture straightening. The Dominion does not take kindly to threats against our command structure, he says slowly. However, we also recognize when continued escalation serves no strategic purpose. Your vessel will be permitted safe passage through this corridor, provided you agree to file a full report on this creature's capabilities with our science division, for archival purposes only. I feel a flicker of relief so intense it nearly buckles my knees, though I keep my expression carefully neutral. I can arrange that, General, provided the report does not include specific activation triggers or countermeasure vulnerabilities. We would prefer such details remain confidential, for obvious reasons. Korath's mouth curls into something that might, on a human face, be the beginning of a smile. A reasonable condition, Handler. It seems your species negotiates more skillfully than your fleet's size might suggest. We've had practice, I say, allowing a small, careful edge of humor into my voice, now that the immediate danger seems to have passed. Small fleets tend to learn diplomacy quickly, General. It's often the only tool available to us. Korath studies me for a moment longer, something almost like respect settling into his expression despite the coldness he still carries. Perhaps that is a lesson my own empire could stand to relearn, he says finally. We have grown accustomed to strength alone deciding outcomes. Your species appears to understand that strength without wisdom is simply a faster path toward unnecessary conflict. I wouldn't go that far, General, I say carefully, unwilling to overstate humanity's virtues in a room still full of armed soldiers. We've made plenty of mistakes of our own. We're just fortunate enough, this time, that one of them didn't cost us everything. Korath inclines his head slightly, accepting the honesty, before gesturing toward one of his officers to begin drafting the formal agreement. Vresh shifts in his chair, wincing slightly at the movement, before addressing me directly one final time. Handler, he says, his voice carrying a strange note I do not immediately recognize. What is this creature's name? Titan, I answer. Vresh studies the dog for a long moment, something unreadable passing across his weathered features. Fitting, he says finally. I will remember that name, and I suspect much of the Dominion soon will as well. The meeting concludes shortly after, with Korath issuing formal orders for our shuttle to be escorted safely back to the horizon, alongside a written agreement outlining the terms of our passage and the promised report. As I am led back through those impossibly wide corridors, Titan walking calmly beside me, I notice something subtle shifting in the way soldiers regard us now. The earlier open fear remains, but layered beneath it now is something closer to grudging acknowledgement, the kind reserved for a threat properly understood rather than dismissed. One soldier, standing rigid near a junction we pass, actually inclines his head slightly as Titan passes, a gesture I do not fully understand but recognize instinctively as respect rather than mockery. I glance down at Titan, half expecting some acknowledgement of the moment, but he simply trots along beside me, tongue lolling, entirely unaware that he has just talked an entire fleet out of destroying the ship that carries him. When our shuttle finally docks back with the horizon, Bennett is waiting in the corridor, her expression a mixture of relief and barely restrained anxiety. "Well?" she asks, before I have even fully stepped through the airlock. "We have safe passage," I say, allowing myself to exhale fully for what feels like the first time in hours. Provided we file a report on Titan's capabilities, nothing that reveals how to counter him, just enough to satisfy their need for context. Bennett closes her eyes briefly, relief washing visibly across her features. "You did well, Ethan. Better than I expected, honestly, given the circumstances." "I had help," I say, glancing down at Titan, who leans against my leg with a contentment that feels almost absurd given everything that just happened. Pierce approaches from further down the corridor, arms still crossed, though his expression has shifted from the tight anxiety of hours earlier into something closer to cautious optimism. "The Dominion fleet is already repositioning," he reports. "Looks like they're preparing to withdraw from the corridor entirely, rather than simply letting us pass through." "They're not just retreating," Whitfield adds, stepping up beside him, holding a tactical display showing the fleet's movement patterns. "They're broadcasting something across an open Dominion channel, some kind of general advisory." "Can we intercept it?" Bennett asks. Whitfield nods, tapping her console, and a moment later, a translated transmission plays through the corridor speakers, General Korath's voice carrying clearly across what appears to be a fleet-wide broadcast. "All vessels are advised that the human exploratory ship designated UES Horizon carries specialized biological defense capabilities of significant concern. Direct hostile engagement with this vessel or its crew is not recommended without proper preparation and authorization from command." The corridor falls silent as the transmission ends, every crew member present processing the same strange, disorienting realization together. "They're warning their own fleet about us," Pierce says slowly, something between disbelief and dark amusement coloring his voice. "Not us," Bennett corrects quietly, glancing down at Titan, who simply yawns, entirely unbothered by the magnitude of what has just unfolded. "Him." I kneel down beside Titan, scratching behind his ears the way I have every day since being assigned as his handler, and for a moment, none of the fear, none of the danger, none of the political weight of the last several hours feels quite as heavy as it did only minutes ago. "You hear that, boy?" I murmur. "You're famous now." Titan simply leans into my hand, tail thumping softly against the corridor floor, utterly indifferent to the fact that somewhere out among the stars, an entire fleet has just learned to fear a dog. 3 days pass before the Dominion fleet fully withdraws from the corridor, and during that time, the Horizon becomes a very different ship than the one I boarded weeks ago as a nervous new cadet. Crew members who once barely acknowledged my presence in the mess hall now save me a seat without being asked. Officers who never bothered learning my name suddenly know it perfectly, along with Titan's, which they use far more often than mine. I do not mind. Titan has earned every ounce of that attention, even if he remains entirely unaware of what he has become to everyone around him. Cole calls me into the science bay on the second day, his expression a strange mixture of excitement and lingering unease as he gestures toward a wall of data readouts. "I've been reviewing the bonding telemetry from the incident," he explains, tapping through several charts I do not fully understand. The energy signature Titan produced doesn't match anything currently cataloged in known biological defense mechanisms, human or otherwise. Meaning what, exactly? I ask. Meaning whoever designed this program was working with technology and biology decades ahead of anything publicly acknowledged, Cole says, lowering his voice slightly despite the fact that we are alone. This wasn't a simple genetic enhancement, Ethan. This was something closer to a symbiotic system, biological and technological components working together in ways I've never seen documented before. I glance toward the kennel corner of the science bay, where Titan lies stretched across a padded mat, chewing contentedly on a rubber toy, as though the events of the past few days mean nothing at all to him. Do you think there are others like him? I ask. Cole hesitates before answering. I think it would be strange if there weren't. A program this advanced doesn't build a single prototype and stop. Somewhere out there, other ships may be carrying their own versions of Titan, waiting for their own moment to matter. The thought unsettles me in a way I do not fully expect, though I am not entirely certain whether the unease comes from the idea itself, or from realizing how much of my own ship's true capabilities remain hidden even from the people serving aboard it. On the fourth day, Bennett calls a full crew briefing, and I find myself standing near the front of the room, Titan seated calmly beside me, while she addresses the assembled officers and science staff. Dominion Command has formally confirmed our safe passage through the corridor, she announces, and a quiet ripple of relief moves through the room. More significantly, we've received unofficial word through diplomatic channels that several neighboring fleets have taken notice of the incident. Notice how, exactly? Pierce asks from where he stands near the wall, arms crossed as always. Bennett's mouth twitches into something that is almost, but not quite, a smile. It seems humanity's reputation across this quadrant has shifted rather significantly in the span of a single encounter. We are no longer being referred to as an insignificant exploratory species. What are we being called now? Whitfield asks, curiosity clear in her voice. Bennett glances down at Titan before answering. The species that keeps monsters as pets. A ripple of laughter moves through the room, tension breaking in a way that feels earned rather than forced, and for the first time since the alarms first tore me from sleep days earlier, I allow myself to genuinely relax. Later that same day, I receive a personal message routed through the long delay relay back to Earth, from my younger sister, Grace Carter, who somehow already heard fragments of what happened out here, likely leaked through some official channel long before the full story was ever meant to reach civilian ears. Her message is short, recorded before she had access to any real details, her voice bright, with a mixture of worry and pride that makes my chest ache with homesickness. They're saying some dog saved your whole ship, she says, laughing nervously at her own words. Is that actually true? Please tell me that's actually true, and please tell me you're safe. Mom hasn't stopped watching the news channels since the story broke. I record a reply that evening, keeping it simple, promising her I am safe, promising her Titan is safe too, and leaving out most of the details Bennett would prefer remain unspoken until the official reports clear proper channels. It is strange, sitting in my quarters composing a message for someone light years away, trying to explain an event that has already reshaped how an entire alien empire perceives our species, while also just wanting my sister to stop worrying about her older brother. That evening, I take Titan for a walk through the observation deck, the same corridor where everything began, though it feels entirely different now, calm and quiet, stars sliding past the viewport in slow, familiar patterns. Titan trots along beside me, occasionally pausing to sniff at some corner of the deck, utterly unbothered by his newfound reputation across half a dozen alien fleets. You really have no idea what you did, do you? I murmur, watching him investigate a support strut with far more interest than diplomatic history seems to deserve. He glances up at me briefly, tail wagging once, before returning his attention to more pressing matters, like the faint scent of whatever cleaning solution the maintenance crew used earlier that day. I laugh quietly to myself, settling onto a bench near the viewport, and Titan eventually joins me, resting his head across my lap with a contented sigh. For a long while, neither of us moves, simply watching the stars drift by in comfortable silence. It is Bennett who finds me there an hour later, stepping onto the observation deck with a data pad tucked under one arm and an expression I cannot quite read. "We've received another transmission," she says, settling onto the bench beside me. "This one from further out, a neutral trading consortium operating several systems beyond Dominion territory." "What do they want?" I ask, straightening slightly. "Diplomatic contact," Bennett says. "Apparently word travels quickly out here, and several independent factions are curious about establishing formal relations with a species capable of what they're calling unconventional deterrence measures." I glance down at Titan, who has fallen asleep entirely, snoring softly against my leg. "They want to meet him, don't they?" "They want to meet all of us," Bennett corrects gently. "But yes, I suspect Titan will feature prominently in every conversation from this point forward." I consider this for a long moment, watching the stars continue their slow drift outside the viewport, thinking back to the mockery in Vresh's voice only days earlier, the casual cruelty of being dismissed as vermin before we had even spoken a single sentence in our own defense. "Captain," I say finally, "do you think this changes things? Really changes them? I mean, not just for this encounter, but for how the galaxy sees us going forward?" Bennett is quiet for a moment, considering the question with the same careful weight she gives every difficult decision. "I think," she says slowly, "that first impressions carry enormous weight out here, among species who have never had reason to consider us anything but small and insignificant. What happened in that corridor didn't just protect this ship, it rewrote the story other species tell about humanity, whether we intended it to or not." "And Titan is the one who rewrote it," I say quietly. "Titan, and you," Bennett corrects. "It was your composure in that meeting, your ability to negotiate safe passage under threat of war, that turned a moment of chaos into something we could actually build on. Never underestimate the part you played in this, Ethan." I do not fully believe her, not entirely, though I appreciate the sentiment more than I let on. Whatever role I played, I know the true weight of that encounter rested with the creature currently drooling softly against my uniform, entirely unaware of the diplomatic storm he has set into motion across an entire region of space. Over the following weeks, as the horizon continues its slow journey back toward more familiar systems, word of the incident spreads further than any of us anticipated. Other human vessels begin requesting details, curious captains reaching out through official channels to ask about bonding protocols, about uplift programs, about whether their own ships might carry similar hidden protections none of us were ever told about. Bennett fields most of these inquiries with careful diplomacy, revealing just enough to satisfy curiosity, without exposing details that might compromise whatever advantage Titan's existence has given humanity among the wider galactic community. I find myself, more often than I expected, standing beside her during these conversations, Titan seated calmly nearby, an unspoken symbol reinforcing every careful word she chooses. One such request comes from a small envoy vessel representing a modest coalition of independent worlds, none of them Dominion members, all of them apparently eager to establish contact with humanity before any larger power claims exclusive influence over us. Their delegate, a slender, soft-spoken being named simply Vantik, requests a brief meeting aboard the Horizon, and Bennett agrees, provided the meeting remains strictly diplomatic in nature. Vantik arrives without armor, without weapons, and without any of the swagger Vresh carried during his own visit weeks earlier. Instead, they approach Titan with open curiosity, keeping a respectful distance, hands clasped politely behind their back, rather than reaching out uninvited. "We have heard the story from several sources now," Vantik says, their translated voice, careful and measured. "Each version differs slightly, though all agree on one point. Your creature responded only when provoked, and showed no interest in further harm once the threat was resolved. This suggests restraint, not aggression." "That's an accurate reading," I say, watching Titan sit calmly beside Vantik, entirely relaxed in a way he never was around Vresh's soldiers. Restraint paired with capability is rare among species we have encountered, Vantik continues thoughtfully. It suggests your people value peace, yet remain prepared for its absence. That is a difficult balance for any civilization to maintain. They glance toward me, something like genuine curiosity flickering behind their expression. Tell me, Handler, what else does your species keep hidden that the rest of the galaxy has not yet had reason to discover? I do not have a good answer for that question, not one I am willing to share with a delegate I have only just met, so I offer only a small, careful smile instead. I suppose you'll simply have to keep talking to us and find out. Vantik seems satisfied with that answer, and the meeting concludes shortly after with mutual expressions of goodwill and a tentative agreement to establish further contact once the Horizon completes its return journey. Watching their shuttle depart from the observation deck afterward, I find myself thinking about how quickly the galaxy's perception of us has shifted, from vermin worth mocking to a mystery worth courting, all because of one small, unplanned moment of contact days earlier. Near the end of our journey, as we approach the final jump point back toward Earth's home systems, I receive an unexpected transmission request routed directly to my personal console, marked with Dominion diplomatic clearance. Curious and more than a little apprehensive, I accept it, and Admiral Vresh's face appears on the screen, looking considerably healthier than the last time I saw him, though his expression carries none of its earlier arrogance. "Handler," he says, inclining his head slightly in what I recognize, after a moment, as a gesture of respect rather than mockery. "I wish to speak with you directly, away from the formalities of official channels." "Admiral," I reply carefully, uncertain what to expect from this conversation. "I hope you've made a full recovery." "I have," he says, "though I confess the experience has left me with a rather different perspective on your species than the one I held when we first met." "I imagine it would," I say, allowing a small measure of dry humor into my voice. Vresh's mouth curls into something almost like genuine amusement. "I mocked your creature before I understood him," he admits. "That was an error I do not intend to repeat, regarding your species as a whole. Tell me, Handler, does your fleet intend to explore further into contested regions of space, now that your reputation precedes you?" "We're explorers, Admiral," I say. "That hasn't changed, regardless of how other fleets choose to perceive us now." "No," Vresh agrees slowly, "I suppose it hasn't. Though I suspect you will find far fewer species eager to test that reputation directly, going forward." The transmission ends shortly after, leaving me alone on the observation deck once more, Titan stretched out beside me, blissfully unaware of the Admiral he so thoroughly humbled only weeks earlier. I look out at the stars, thinking about everything that has changed since that first alarm tore me from sleep, thinking about how close we came to disaster, and how strange it feels that salvation arrived in the form of a loyal, gentle creature who simply wanted to protect the person he was bonded to. Humanity was mocked before we ever had the chance to prove ourselves. We were called vermin, decorative, insignificant, small in every way that mattered to fleets built on generations of conquest and dominance. And in the span of a single touch, all of that changed, not through violence we chose, but through loyalty we could never have manufactured on command. Titan shifts beside me, resting his head against my leg with a contented sigh, and I scratch behind his ears the way I have every single day since being assigned as his handler, back when I believed my role aboard this ship was simple, unremarkable, easily overlooked. I know better now. Somewhere out among the stars, word continues spreading of the creature who humbled a Dominion admiral with nothing more than a single, gentle touch, and of the small, unremarkable ship that carried him. Other fleets watch us now with caution rather than dismissal, curiosity rather than contempt, and I suspect that shift will follow humanity into every future encounter among the stars, whether we seek it or not. I think, too, of Vantik's question, asked so gently during their brief visit, about what else our species might be keeping hidden from a galaxy that has only just begun to notice us. I do not have an answer for that yet, and perhaps I never will, not fully, but I find a strange comfort in not knowing, in understanding that humanity's story out here is still being written, one encounter at a time, and that whatever comes next, we will face it the same way we faced Vresh's mockery, with more resilience than anyone watching expected to find in us. Bennett finds me again later that night, standing quietly beside me at the viewport without a word, simply watching the stars alongside Titan and me for a long while before finally speaking. "Whatever waits for us back home," she says softly, "I suspect it will look at this crew a little differently than it did when we left." "Good differently, or worried differently?" I ask. She considers the question for a moment before answering. "Perhaps both. Sometimes those two things aren't as far apart as we'd like to believe." I nod, understanding exactly what she means, and for a while longer, the three of us simply remain there together, quiet and steady, while the ship carries us home toward a galaxy that will never again mistake humanity for something small. For now, though, I am content simply to sit here on this quiet observation deck, watching stars drift slowly past the viewport, while the most important creature in the entire galaxy sleeps peacefully against my leg, utterly unaware of the legend he has become. And somewhere far behind us, retreating quietly back into Dominion territory, an admiral who once laughed at the sight of us now carries a story he will never forget, and a lesson the rest of his empire has already begun to learn. Humanity was never vermin. We were simply never given the chance, until now, to show exactly what we protect, and exactly how far we will go to keep it safe.